Welcome to this panel discussion. I'm delighted to welcome you to CapstoneLaw's Regulatory Roundtable as of today.
So my statement for today is, good things come to those who wait.
I believe FINMA will lead to more outsourcing and the use of designated IT solutions. This will be a boost for standardization.
Obviously, from our perspective, that regulation is rather an opportunity than just a threat.
Well, the first stage is completed, but there is certainly more to come.
Dear guests, dear panelists, I'm delighted to have you with us and welcome you to CapstoneLaw's Regulatory Roundtable as of today. We are going to discuss with industry leaders and experts in the regulatory fields the application of FinLec and FinIA to financial industry and the financial services. Our panelists today are Cornelia Bernhard, Chief Compliance Officer from BlackRock Zurich. Cornelia is heading the Compliance Department of BlackRock Switzerland since over 4 years and is a proven product specialist and leading the implementation of regulatory developments within BlackRock. So welcome, Cornelia. With us is as well Dr. Diana Imbach-Haumüller, Deputy CEO of the Swiss Fund Asset Management Association. Diana is one of the driving forces behind the development and creation of the new laws, and I'm very glad to have the opportunity as a new starter in the lawyer scenes to discuss with her the regulatory developments and the implications of FinLec and FinIA. We have Simon Welti, who is the CEO of VQF and FinControl Swiss AG. FinControl has been established with the purpose to be a supervisory authority in the future for asset managers and trustees on the FinLec and FinIA. I'm very interested to hear where we stay on this side and what are the next steps for FinControl and the supervisory authorities. Last but not least, I welcome my friend Frédéric Lenoir, who is a General Counsel from Seeds Asset Management and has more than 15 years of experience in the legal and compliance area, particularly in the asset management industry. Please note for all our guests and participants that you have the possibility to raise questions. For that, please use the button below, F&A button, and my colleague Max Tondera, for which I'm very, very grateful that he organizes all the time these webinars for us at CapstoneLaw, will lead them to me, and I hope that in the end of this panel discussion we will have time to discuss the one or other question. So again, from my side, thank you very much and welcome to this panel discussion. First of all, I would like to give our panelists the opportunity to come along with a first statement of FinSA and FinIA, and I would like to start, maybe Diana, we switch over to you, and I will ask you first to give your kind of statement on FinLec and FinIA.
Thank you, Dirk. Hello, everyone. Well, the first stage is completed, but there is certainly more to come.
Thanks a lot. I think, Cornelia, you are back on track now and we can all hear you. It's now your stage for your statement.
So my statement for today is, good things come to those who wait.
Thanks, Cornelia. What is your statement, Simon?
Well, first of all, hello everybody and thank you for having me. My statement is obviously from our perspective that regulation is rather an opportunity than just a threat.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. And last but not least, Frederick.
Thanks also for having me. My statement is a bit less philosophical maybe. So I believe FINMA will lead to more outsourcing in our industry and the use of designated IT solutions. And so I think this will be a boost for standardization.
Thank you very much all to you for these interesting votes, and that brings me now to our discussion, and I'm happy to raise further questions to the panelists, and obviously there is the possibility for all of the panelists to discuss and to interrupt and to raise a hand or to give another vote if something is, or you are in another opinion. Cornelia, what are BlackRock's initial experiences and the feedback from the front by implementing FinLec and FinIA as of today?
To be very honest, Dirk, we didn't have a huge amount of feedback from our client-facing employees or the client side since the entry into force on the 1st of January this year. And I think there are primarily 3 reasons for that. Firstly, we engaged very heavily with our clients throughout the legislative process. Secondly, as our clients are primarily pension funds and insurance institutions, most of them had some experience with MiFID, and so the requirements of FinLec are not really, unknown to them. And thirdly, I believe the 2-year transitional period for the implementation of the organizational and conduct rules, and of course the current COVID-related market situation, may be another reason why FinLec is currently not the main area of focus for our clients. In terms of market players, however, we know of course that asset managers, fund management companies, etc. are intensively working on the FinLec implementation. So do we, and we are currently taking advantage of the transitional periods.
Okay, so in other words, what I hear out of your statement and your answer, there's enough time, enough room to still implement the criteria of FinLec and FinIA. Diana, do you have the same experiences and observations, or did you hear other feedback from the market players so far?
No, actually, that's pretty much what I hear from our members as well. Asset managers tend to be pretty good on track at the moment. Some of the main areas of concern, or at least discussions, are of course transitional provisions. So when it comes to implementation of the Financial Services Act and the parallel phasing out of CISA, this is certainly an area where some discussions are going on. Another topic is cross-border business or Swiss entities of foreign asset managers working here in Switzerland or working cross-border in Switzerland. Also here, the requirement for this cross-border business. And then, of course, the definition of the fund distribution and the financial service, how this is or how this should be defined, or how fund distribution, pure fund distribution, should be treated. So that's let's say the 3 main areas where we really have discussions with our members.
Great, thanks a lot, Diana. I think we're coming later to certain questions related to specific topics of FinLec and especially there is a question for you on the distribution side of things. Simon, what do you think are the biggest hurdles of the new legislation? What is your experience as the new kind of supervisory authority?
Well, I think what we have to be aware of is that this really is a shift in the mindset. It's a forced shift in the mindset for a lot of players in the parabanking sector. When you look at the current market situation, as Diana has stated, there are bigger asset management companies, trustees, and so on and so forth, with international client relationships. They're familiar with international regulatory developments such as MiFID, etc. But there are also smaller companies, smaller financial intermediaries in Switzerland who so far only had the mere obligation to be supervised with regards to AMLA conduct, and now they will be under a holistic prudential supervision. So this is really a shift in their mindset, in their business setup, because you not only have to report certain aspects of your activity, but you have to be fully and holistically supervised, and this has an impact on quite a lot of financial intermediaries and market players at this very moment. Obviously, they also profit from the transitional period. What I would also, not to warn, but just make everybody aware that that transitional period will be over rather soon than later. So it actually makes sense to, make your homework right now and think about the next steps that you have to take to be within the legal requirements until the end of 2021-22.
Thanks a lot. Frederick, Seeds Asset Management is an internationally operating asset managers. You are aware of certain international kind of regulatory developments. What is, out of your point of view, as a kind of a broader organization with Luxembourg and specific other funds which you are managing, the biggest hurdle now for you to adapt to FIDLAC and to FINIC, and what do you think could have been done better?
Well, I'm not sure if I would suggest what could have been done better. But to come back to your question, what would be hurdles for a group like ours? So we have implemented MiFID II, and we took at that time the decision to implement it group-wide, so also in Switzerland. Reason for that being mostly operational efficiencies. So in that sense, indeed, we know a lot of the new obligations in a very similar form. The step to be FIDLAC or FinSA compliant is not so big. There are some special cases. Client segmentation might be one where the definition is a little bit different for professional clients. So our objective there is always to find pragmatic solutions to keep operational complexity low, because that also keeps operational risk low. So we might not always try to find the last perfect solution to go for the last client where there might be a possibility in the interest of operational efficiency. So that would be, let's say, the first step, what we assess how we would be impacted directly. And the second step is we would probably look at how the market and market participants are impacted. We heard already distribution, change of mindset. And so basically we would try to understand what would be the consequence of that. So for example, distributors, if they lose their status so far, what would be a consequence for us? And possibly how can we help these market participants in a partnership?
So that is a very, may I come back to that? So do you think, you talked about client segmentation, do you think that all the work you have done in this kind of area, you can adapt it in a similar way, or is that a lot of work for you to reallocate the work to your clients?
No. For us, that I think we can use a lot of the work that we did so far. But again, that is because we are not trying to fine-tune jurisdiction by jurisdiction and trying to max out the possibilities, but to have one approach that would suit and would be compliant in all of these jurisdictions.
Great. Thanks a lot for this, Frederick. Diana, I would like to come to an other topic on the FIDLAC and FINIC as time is running. So FIDLAC FINIC created a lot of new supervisory authorities, such as the Ombudsman Office, the supervisory organizations, the advisory registrars, and so on and so forth. Today, most of them have not been approved yet, and most of them are still, waiting for their application. Do you have, as an insight for us and our guests, an exam timetable or something like which we can use for our client base? Where do we stay with these kind of rules?
To be honest, regarding the supervisory organization, I'm not really the expert, so we should better ask Simon maybe whether he has...
He's coming later to that question.
Okay, more insights on that. Regarding the Ombudsman and the registry, I expect that the respective approval will be, we will see them by the end of this month. This is, as far as I know, also, or it used to be quite a while now, the official schedule of FINMA and the Federal Department of Finance. However, potential applicants for the registry and the ombudsman, they always said, oh, maybe in March, maybe in April, maybe May. But as far as I'm aware, FINMA and the Federal Department of Finance, they have mentioned now for quite a while it will be in the first half of 2020 and potentially the later end of the half. So I expect we will see them soon.
Okay. This brings me to one additional question, because that has been raised by a client yesterday in a call. Is there any intention from the supervisory authorities that due to the pandemic situation and COVID-19 and the lockdown and people in the home office, that the kind of implementation periods will be extended?
You asked me, or?
Yes, I asked you, sorry.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, because, the implementation period with 2 years, it's quite long. I don't think that there are any intentions to extend that. I haven't heard, well, I've heard in the market some kind of desire that it would be nice to extend, but most of the market participants actually, they know that's fine, 2 years. And also, if you keep in mind, we have asked for a extension or a later entrance into force by 1 year in last summer, and then it was really, we learned it was this desire of a lot of market participants that they want to implement or be able to implement as soon as possible. So if we would just push back another 6 months or another year, I think that would not be for the benefit of everyone, especially not those who are already implementing the new regulation. So I don't think so.
Okay, thanks a lot. Simon, that brings me over to you. As mentioned by Diana, the supervisory organization is one of the major innovations on the FinLec and FinIA. Would you mind to give us some kind of insights about where you stay and what you are doing at FinControl at the moment?
So FinControl currently has its application pending with FINMA. We submitted the application some weeks ago. As you know, FINMA has, I think that's even a legal requirement to respond to the application within 6 months. So it can be expected that the first licenses will be given to certain applicants in the course of this summer, meaning not necessarily by the end of this month, but presumably by the end of August or September. The latest, I think, the first supervisory organizations will be licensed and can then start their business activity and actually affiliate the first financial institutions under their umbrella, provided that those financial institutions fulfill all the legal requirements. Now, FinControl Swiss itself will be acting as an independent company under or within the group of VQF. And we particularly will be a supervisory organization, like you stated when you were opening this panel there, for asset managers and trustees who now under FINIA have to obtain a FINMA license and have to have or provide everybody who wants to see it a respective affiliation with a supervisory organization, such as FinControl Swiss will be one.
Thanks a lot. That brings me to other kind of supervisory bodies or institutions under FinLec and FinIA. Cornelia, one of the new institutions is the Ombudsman Office, which is here already for banks, but new for asset managers and for the financial industry. What do you think, or does BlackRock think this is a benefit for our industries, or will that kind of be a game changer in the future?
I mean, you know, it's an additional measure of investor protection. And as you mentioned, Dirk, this is not a novelty in the Swiss marketplace, given that the Swiss banking ombudsman, for example, already exists. So this is really just an extension in the sense that it will cover all financial services providers. And it's also in alignment with international standards. I mean, we know for sure that the ombudsman in the UK, you know, plays quite an important role as a mediator, but also as a decision authority. So in Switzerland, I think the ombudsman will primarily benefit the retail client, because it will provide them with an independent and impartial mediator in case, you know, a complaint couldn't be resolved to the client's satisfaction. For financial service provider, I think the ombudsman can be a good sounding board, you know, challenging his own position and improve behaviors if that's necessary.
Thank you very much, Cornelia. Frederick, one of the new institutions is the advisor register, which replaces somehow the distribution license under the Collective Investment Scheme Act. As the advisor register does not be an institution to supervise any kind of distributors, for me as a legal advisor, would be very interested to know, are you, in case you're using distributors, how do you monitor now these distributors you contracted with? Is there any kind of specific processes you're going to apply or to implement?
Thank you for that question. So indeed, monitoring of distributors, I think is an important task in our industry, at least until now. There's more and more focus on this. I think how it is done, how you select your distributors and partners, and how you keep on monitoring them. So we already today do due diligence on every distributor before we appoint him. Then the appointment is in our group is done through a committee which has representative of risk, compliance, obviously of the sales force in it. And the authorization you mentioned, so the license, that was one of the elements. Going forward, we'll definitely look into the register and take that into consideration. But there are obviously a lot of other requirements. And these requirements, as I tried to mention initially, I think they are increasing. And if you look, for example, the ALFI has published some years ago some guidance how this could be looked at. You see typical due diligence questions and topics. And so what will be the consequence of these increasing requirements? I think either there could be less distributors, and that would basically have an impact on smaller players, because just the cost of onboarding them is too high. There could be concentration on the funds that are distributed by several. Or the alternative is an increase in efficiency in the process, and that would be done either, as I mentioned in my initial statement, either by outsourcing. So if, for example, you use one firm that does a due diligence on distributors, and then this can be scaled and used for many players in the industry, obviously that generates scale effects and efficiencies. So either by outsourcing to few players who do this due diligence, for the industry, or by using designated IT solutions, which also would help with efficiency gains. So I would expect, when I talked of standardization, I expect more in these middle and back office tasks, that what you look at distributors, what type of documents you request, and so on, that this becomes more standardized.
Thank you very much, Frederick. I would like to come quickly back to the supervisory organizations, because that is one of the, out of my point of view, biggest compromise between low supervision and full supervision between FINMA. And I think that's a question for Simon and Diana, or Diana and Simon. What is your view? Is that a kind of a good solution? Maybe we start with Diana. Is it a good solution to establish the supervisory organization? And then to you, Simon, as the professional of supervisor organization, what is your view on that?
Well, I think one must be honest. It's a political compromise. It's not a full FinMA supervision, but it is a supervision. So I think the goal was, or the need was, for a political compromise, and that's what we have on the table now. So whether that is good for or former independent asset managers, whether that's efficient, that remains to be seen. I think the concept seems to work well, but for me, in order to assess whether that's really a helpful model, it's how much are the supervisory authority intending to do by themselves, and how much are they going to delegate, and this can be very different, changing from organization to organization. I think if an organization tends to delegate a lot to auditors, then it's maybe not such a good solution in my view, because it's just, I assume it's just more expensive. But if a new supervisory organization really tends to do more and do the audit by themselves, then I think it can be quite a smart model of supervision.
Simon, to you, what is your answer to my question?
Well, I think I can echo and concur with Diana's statement almost completely. I think it's a very Swiss compromise solution that we found here again. It's a political process that was beforehand, and this is now the outcome. I think it's a solution that we can work with in a positive aspect from a regulatory perspective. I think what it shows for all asset managers and trustees for future references, they will have a FINMA license, no matter whether they are directly supervised by FINMA or, as it is now, by a supervisory organization. They will have to obtain the license by FINMA. They will always have the license by FINMA, and FINMA is also responsible for the whole sanctioning regime for all supervised financial institutions, also supervised by the supervisory organization. So in that regard, it will be more strict, and it's more comparable to international requirements than it was so far. Now, I think we find particularities. We found to a certain aspect very Swiss particularities in that solution that still guarantees an appropriate solution with regards to appropriate supervision. But also, like Diana said, there are certain areas where we can still see how it will develop itself. So supervisory organizations will have the potential and will have the possibility to do audits themselves, but obviously if the supervisory organizations would do all audits themselves, they would have to have the manpower of a smaller audit company. So there again, we will have to find the best solution, which will be a compromise between the one extreme and the other, such as supervisory organizations themselves are. But I think at the stage where we are right now, we all see how this is being laid out, and now we just have to work with what we have. We don't have any praxis. We don't know exactly how fast the financial institution will affiliate with supervisory organization and will apply with the FINMA license within the transition period of 2 to 3 years. And after that period, we can reassess the situation a little bit better, I think.
Thanks a lot, Simon. So I see that the time is running. However, I think we have one other important question which I would like to discuss. And I mean, we are in a panel discussion. I think we give them another 10 minutes to raise the one or other questions. And that brings me to our next topic, which is the point of sales obligation and the rules of conduct. Another very important topic on the FIDLAC. And Cornelia, FIDLAC contains various rules of conduct, especially on the point of sales obligations. Do you have a specific project in place and to implement those and to educate your front, or what do you do to implement these particular Swiss specific rules of conduct?
Thank you, Dirk. I think you need to first look at what's already in place and what the gaps are. And to give you an example, the suitability requirements for the provision of portfolio management services to professional clients require the documentation of the client's investment objectives. I don't really expect this to be anything new in the client financial service provider relationship. But the financial service provider may not have documented or formalized all the details that FIDLAG requires in the past. And similarly to what Frederick explained earlier, at BlackRock, we've obviously also been looking at the existing MiFID framework because we have already implemented many measures, even though they don't apply to Switzerland. So we are really looking at what can we leverage, including technology. And we are very fortunate that we can use the subject matter expertise of our colleagues in the EU who already went through the MiFID implementation and who are happy to support us if needed. So for us, it's really more about fine-tuning existing policies and procedures rather than building something totally from scratch. And I absolutely appreciate that this may be very different for other market players, depending on their business model and client base.
Thanks a lot. A specific topic, Diana, is on the distribution side, on this distinction between the financial services, the acquisition of a financial instrument, and the difference to the term offer, and then the relation to specific rules of conduct. Would you remind me again how I can kind of bring that to a paper if someone is asking me tomorrow?
It's actually quite a tricky one, and particularly for those who have been working for the fund industry for quite a while. So basically, the financial service and the offering, it's the two components of the former distribution. So, and then you have a look at, and it's two different concepts. So it doesn't necessarily have to be both, right? So for the financial service, what you ask here is at the point of sale, how do you treat your client? So the focus is the contact at the point of sale with your client or your potential client, and the financial service triggers all the Financial Services Act requirements, so the conduct rules, the organizational rules, the client segmentation, registration, ombudsman. And on the other hand, you have the offering. From a fund perspective, this is more a product-specific aspect. So when you ask whether you have an offering or not, it's relevant whether you need product license, whether you need a paying agent or a representative, whether you need to publish a prospectus or a kit. So it's for us, it's really difficult to realize it's two different concepts. It doesn't have to be both. So if you are in the financial service, we are tempted, but you should search for the offering and vice versa. So for instance, you can have a financial service and no offering, which would, for instance, be execution only, but also the other way around, it would work. So that's basically the main difference. It used to be both distribution. Now we have two different concepts asking for very different questions in fact.
So in other words, if I understand it correctly, so the end-to-end kind of my obligations when I'm selling a fund to an end client are different when I'm offering to a institutional client which is using it for its own kind of client base. Is that correct as a summary?
Yes, the first one is a financial service and the later is not considered to be a financial service. Of course, where does that come from? This comes from the exemption we saw until the end of last year in the definition of distribution, and the idea was not to be more stringent than we used to be before.
Thanks a lot, Diana. That's great and brings me to to Simon, to my next question. So as a foreign distributor in Switzerland, so I have a foreign fund in Switzerland, and I have only institutional clients. So I'm free to do whatever I like, because I can always say, hey guys, nothing to do for me. There is no license. You are an institutional client. You take over the point of sale rules of conduct. Is that correct? Is that understanding correct, Simon?
Well, in principle, I would always recommend then to register in one of those advisor registers that should be licensed by the end of this month, albeit there might be, at least in some aspects in this particular case, some exceptions might be applicable. The registration itself is particularly for Swiss financial service providers and foreign financial service providers who do not have to obtain a particular license as a financial institution in Switzerland. And the registration with such an advisory register is rather simple and still gives you a certain level of publicity and transparency in Switzerland, but also internationally. So while VQF within the group will not run such a registry itself, I would always recommend those people with such distribution activities or advisory activities to to register themselves now in one of those registers.
Thanks a lot. I just saw that we got a question from the public, and I think, I don't know, to who, I mean, the floor is open. Does the implementation of, and thank you very much, Roman, for that question. Does the implementation of FinIA finally help to sell Swiss funds in the European Union? Is that something which will help us to bring us there? I think maybe Cornelia, you start. Do you have a view on that? Do you think yes or no?
I don't think the one and the other necessarily, go together, because, the fund passporting regime, that's UCITS or the AIFMD versus MiFID really looks at the regulation of the financial services provider. So I think my answer would be no.
Thanks a lot. What is your view, Diana?
I agree on the product-specific side. So what was actually one of the goals was international competitiveness of this new regulation, and it was mainly focused on the financial service. So the ideal or the idea or the hope was that we would be able to provide financial service to EU clients within the EU, and not necessarily the export of Swiss funds.
Thanks, Diana. So maybe the two gentlemen, Frederick, do you have a different view, or do you think, what is your view as the General Counsel of Seeds Asset Management?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to concur with what Cornelia and Diana said. But I mean, let's be honest. I would love to sell Swiss funds in the EU, but it's just not going to happen. And I think we all know it. It's a pity, but it's just very unrealistic. And I think if you want to target the EU market, you need to use EU domiciled funds. And I think all medium-sized or big groups have the setup for that, and they have Swiss Manco for Swiss funds, and they have EU domiciled Mancos for these funds, and smaller players use external Mancos for that. And yeah, that's a pity for our products. And I also agree with obviously what was Diana said about the objective of this law in terms of equivalence, that this aimed at institutions and services and not products. Yeah, I think I'm a bit skeptical also there. I mean, apart from it being a political question, and that was mentioned before, I think there's the investment firm review ongoing in the EU that will define new ways on how equivalence is tested, and that will be in 1 year when this is defined, and before no test will happen, I think.
Thanks a lot, Frederick. Simon, do you have a different view on this? Or?
Oh, I actually can completely concur with my predecessors, but particularly when it comes to product regulation, I think it will be even more difficult. I think on an institutional level, we at least created, well, the legislator at least created certain comparabilities now with international, in particular European requirements, albeit there are still differences. So also to echo Frederick's statement just before, it's very much a political question, and unfortunately there will probably not be an equivalent approval just based on FinIA and FinSA for future references.
Thanks a lot. I just looking at the watch and see that we are really now overrunning our panel. So, but I would not close the panel without having the opportunity to give each for you a second for a last statement on FIDLEG and FINIC, and the last statement on how do you think that the regulatory environment will develop in the future. And as we started, I would like to start again with Cornelia with the last sentence.
Maybe coming back to my first statements about good things come to those who wait. So we waited for FIDLEG for 8 years, and it will take another 2 before we are fully implemented. But I think ultimately it will achieve the desired outcome of increased investor protection. So I view this very positively.
Thanks a lot. Diana, your last statement.
My last statement is also going back to the first statement. I think we are well on track when it comes to the asset management industry, when we talk about the implementation, but there is still a lot to come, and I think it's not over yet. It's still a lot of work to do. Also on the Financial Institutions Act side, now we are focusing on FIDLEG, but for asset managers, I think next year will be important also to implement the FINIC.
Thanks a lot. Simon, your last sentence to this panel.
Well, like I said also in the beginning, I think regulation can be a chance and an opportunity as well. And like I said before, albeit currently it looks rather burdensome, particularly for financial institutions from the parabanking sector. If you fulfill the requirements and you receive the license by FINMA, this can also be used as a label, as a positive label, because that's also something that's internationally acknowledged and approved. And that brings you hopefully on a higher level than the current AMLA supervision, but no additional supervision for the institutions themselves. So I still hope, and I see a silver lining for financial institutions to use and make use of this regulation in a positive sense, and we will help there.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Frederick?
Yes, so yeah, like the others, I refer a bit to my opening statement, but I think this regulation will have a big impact on how different players work, how they do some of their tasks, and how they have to do some of their tasks. And I really believe we will have some kind of standardization and big efficiency gains. I'm personally quite excited about that, because I think standardization is a great thing in back and middle office, and we all benefit from it. I don't want to fill in 8 different due diligence questionnaires which basically ask me the same, but in 8 different ways. And so I'm very excited. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. So that brings me to the end of our panel. I really thank you all for your time. I think it was an excellent panel. We had a good kind of pace in it. Thank you very, very much. And we close here. We come up CapstoneLaw beginning of July with a new panel and a new invitation on the private market side. So thank you very much, all of you, and thank you to the guests who dialed in. Have a great afternoon and a good week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.